In Chapter 9, we learned about quality management, which is a higher management concept because it applies to both organizations as well as projects. In Chapter 10, we are going to learn about a couple more higher management concepts, namely leadership and ethics. Essentially, we are searching for how, as a project manager or as the leader of an organization, we can be effective and how we can set a good ethical example for others. A project manager must be more than just being knowledgeable about project management tools and processes. He or she must be able to inspire the project team and set the right example so that others are willing to follow. Our learning objectives for this chapter are to describe and understand various leadership approaches, leadership styles, and also get familiar with a very important leadership concept which ties to emotional intelligence. Um, Then we turn our attention to ethics. We discuss why it's important and some of the challenges associated with leading ethically. And we also discuss a process for making ethical decisions. And lastly, we talk about teams and work groups and the culture and diversity associated with teams and how to manage multicultural projects. Up to this point, we have been focusing on management in this course. So what are the differences between leadership versus management? We have to recognize that they're both necessary and they are complementary. They have some commonalities, common things that they both focus on, and there are, of course, things that are very different in management versus leadership. Typically, management is focusing on establishing policies, procedures, ensuring that there are tools available for people in an organization to carry out the work in a predictable, in a repeatable manner. Typically, the type of activities that you see involved in management, as we have been talking in this course up to this point, activities such as planning, organizing, controlling, staffing, monitoring. On the other hand, leadership is focusing more on how to influence others so that a common goal can be achieved. So the type of things that are important to leadership are things such as vision, change, aligning people to the goal of the organization, motivating them, and the like. This is a nice graph that shows the commonality between leadership and management, while it is also showing the different activities and focus that each of them have. I found this graph and the write-up in the slide before, and I have provided the links to the sources. There are actually these are a couple of good articles that differentiate between leadership and management. So what are the capabilities and competencies that a leader needs to possess. One of the key competencies is the ability to form a vision of the future and be able to articulate and communicate that vision with others, and be able to attract others to follow that vision. You see, the vision can be subscribed to by others, by followers, but as a leader, you can't really force or command the vision to the people in the organization. Good leaders also have the ability to establish a relationship of trust with their followers or the people in their organization, or in the case of a project manager, with the project team members. And that trust typically is because the leader has been consistent, he has been reliable, and he or she has been fair in his doings. So those are some of the competencies as they interact with others. But as importantly, another competency of a good leader is the management of self. That means that knowing what you're good at, be able to demonstrate how well you do that. But it also means that you know what you're not good at, and you make sure that you reach out for help, or you have team members who in fact are good in those shortcomings that you have, so that as a whole you don't have any shortcomings. This is another good list of leadership competencies, in this case 13 competencies, and you notice that it starts with being visionary and being able to think strategically in long term. Also, the ability to adapt to environment and be able to lead change management in an organization. This is a topic, change management is a topic that we are going to study in the next chapter. The third competency is driving, to have a drive for results. This ties to what we have been talking about in the context of project management, what we refer to as MOV, measurable organizational value. So in the case of a project manager, the drive for result would be towards the MOV. The leadership capability in terms of leading the team. While you're leading the team, one of the corollary to that is to be able to help people on your team to develop and progress in their profession and in their career. Having an entrepreneurial orientation means you're more nimble, you're not bureaucratic, you actually adjust and take advantage of the opportunities as they come. Values and ethics are topics that we will discuss later in this chapter. Being oriented towards providing a service to your customers, to your stakeholders in the case of projects. Relationship management and collaboration, being able to work with people, collaborate with people, so that you achieve the desired outcome. Planning and organizing, of course, those are the skills that we have been talking about for many chapters in this course. Quality orientation, commitment to having a stellar quality, good quality product put in place that meet the customer's expectations rather than just trying to get the project done. And analysis and problem solving, and being able to take in data and put together a solution to a problem. And finally, the ability to manage risk, come up with response plans as you encounter risk. You can actually, you have a game plan to deal with it. So these are some of the key competencies that good leaders have. The leadership competencies we just looked at, sometimes referred to as hard skills. Contrasting that, there are some soft skills that leaders possess. These skills are their ability to feel things and sense things. For example, they have a good understanding of perhaps the business, the market, the organization, the world situation. They have a courage to always do the right thing, even when doing the right thing is difficult. For example, in some ethical situations that we are going to discuss later in this chapter. They have compassion, particularly compassion about what they do, about the people they interact with, the people that are part of their project. They have compassion about the goal of the project or the vision of the organization. They're respectful to the people that are within their organization, within their project, and they are genuine in doing and performing their true sense, the true self, rather than faking it. I think most people see through fake leaders very quickly. By the way, I have a link to a very interesting podcast by Freakonomics that talks about what does a CEO actually do. You may find this pretty interesting. The whole series of Freakonomics podcasts, I find them very interesting. This particular one has some tie with the topic that we are talking in this chapter. Kouzes and Posner have researched and written about effective leadership for more than 20 years. And what they have found is that leaders are not born. They are ordinary people who actually practice and learn leadership attributes and competencies. And looking at leaders, they have found 5 practices that would help others to become more successful as leaders. So let's take a look at these practices that they have identified, these 5 practices. The model that Kouzes and Posner proposed has 5 elements. The first one is model the way. Basically set an example as a leader. Second one is inspiring your organization or your team to a shared vision. Thirdly, challenging the process, that is questioning status quo and when warranted, change the process. Fourthly, enable others to act. This is the empowering of others to uh, take action and be productive. And the last one is encourage the heart, which is reaching out really to people's heart rather than just being logical on all aspects of the business. There is a short video about this that you can take a look at, but we actually will look at every one of these attributes separately in the subsequent slides. Now let's take a look at each of the 5 practices that are identified in Kouzes and Posner's leadership model. The first one is model the way. This is for the leader to set an example, to lead by example. People observe your behavior more than what you say, and you have to demonstrate your beliefs, and you best demonstrate your beliefs through how you behave. So modeling the way is a good way to really earn the right to lead others, and you also set an example of what as a leader you expect from others. If you're a slacker, you can't ask others to work hard. So people look at your behavior and follow you and model your behavior. So that's the first practice. So looking at the 5 practices in this model, the first one is inspire a shared vision. This is critical for leaders to have an exciting vision that can inspire other people to commit to that purpose. As an example, when I was with U.S. courts and I was responsible for probation and pretrial services technology, one of the visions that we established was to enable probation officers to carry out their duties from anywhere that they happen to be in the community, in the office, or in the jail cell. They should be able to carry out all the activities that they require to do. This vision, we communicated that with the probation community, and it was endorsed, and it was exciting for the officers to see that future, and that's how we got the main stakeholders as well as our own team excited about this eventuality. The third practice of exemplary leadership is challenging the process. Good leaders don't always accept status quo. They tend to venture out. They want to challenge the status quo and look for opportunities, new opportunities, innovation. They don't like bureaucracy and stagnation. But leaders don't always come up with what is the right answer. They typically are very good listeners, and they listen to others for ideas that brings about change. And when there are good ideas that they can take on and make happen, they're able to bring along people, but also minimize the risk of failure, but by making sure that all aspects of the change that they're proposing is thought through, so the the risk of failure is minimal. The fourth practice identified in this model is empowering others to act. This is where leaders create an environment and empower and motivate their employees to do their best and keep a sense of ownership with them. You remember that we talked about this, that employees or workers need to have a sense of ownership and pride in what they are doing, and that's the environment that the leader wants to create. At the same time, the leader needs to encourage collaboration among employees and building a trusting environment. People are a lot more productive in organizations, on teams where there is trust versus there is suspicion that everybody's looking behind their back. And as the leader does this and empowers people and notices that they can take on more responsibilities, the leader should be happy to give away some of his or her responsibilities to the employees and help them to develop the skills and competencies so that at one point they themselves, the employees, can become good leaders. My own philosophy in this area is that a good leader needs to find the best employees, the best people to bring on the organization, share the vision, as we talked about, an exciting vision, and then let them loose, get out of their way so that they can do the best they can. And you would be surprised and you would be amazed of what people can do if they are empowered and if they are supported by their leader. And the final practice in this leadership model is encourage the heart. This is dealing with leaders being able to recognize accomplishments and appreciate those accomplishments. This can be in a public setting to recognize accomplishments of the team or accomplishment of individuals. There should be a link when that recognition is done for what performance is the person being recognized, and whatever performance or contribution to the goal of the organization or the project, that needs to be highlighted. And these can be extensive celebration, or in some cases a very simple thank you note to a person who has done or led a major effort goes a long way. These recognitions and celebrations need to be authentic, they need to be real, but they do help to build a strong team culture where performance is recognized and acknowledged and celebrated. Daniel Goleman is a psychologist who has studied different leadership styles and has identified 6 different styles. But what he also has noticed is that the best leaders do not have just one style. They possess many styles and they use the appropriate style depending on the situation they're dealing with. So they change their style depending on the situation. So it's a mix and match based on the leader's personal style as well as the situation that the leader is dealing with. The first style is coercive. It's basically a leader says, just do it the way I'm telling you. This style can be effective in a crisis situation. If there's an emergency, somebody has to yell, get out this way, and everybody has to follow. But it can also be ineffective in other situations where really there is no crisis, and it may have a negative impact in the organization. Typically, people would like to understand the orders or the commands or the direction they're moving towards. So this style would not bode well in generating new ideas, having a good communication. It stifles communication. It's much, very much a one-way communication that just do it the way I'm telling you, and I don't really want to hear your ideas, and even though there may be some better ideas, we just don't have time for it, or I know that this is the best way to do it. So it can be effective in some situations, and in many cases it's not very effective. Next is the authoritative style. This is when the leader would say, come with me. They paint a vision, they build enthusiasm around that vision, and they show how individual employees fit into that vision, into that picture. And they basically lay out the path to that objective or that destination, and empower people to get there in any way they can. This is good when especially an organization is off track and a leader is trying to pull it back and redirect the organization. It typically does not work well if the leader is experienced, or the leader is working with very experienced or subject matter expert team, and if the leader comes overbearing, this style would not work very effectively. Another style of management is affiliative style. This is when the leader believes that people come first. He or she tries to build a very strong emotional bond with people in the team, so that relationship can translate into the team being very loyal and being able to create some harmony. This style is particularly effective when the leader is trying to build a team and bring some harmony and trust and better communication to a team. And it does not work well when people in the organization need more structure, more direction. So in those situations, the over-caring and over-nurturing may be perceived as well, maybe everything is accepted by this leader, so it may promote mediocrity in performance. The democratic style is when the leader asks people, what do you think, when there is a decision to be made. So the leader is interested to hear the ideas from the different team members, and the leader would use this as building trust and also show respect to the opinion of the people on the team. So people would feel that they have a say in major decisions, and it works well when the leader needs to get the buy-in or reach consensus from others on the team. However, it does not work well if the team members are not experienced and they are not capable of providing sound advice to the leader. The next leadership style is pace setting. This is when a leader says, do it as I do it. So the leader sets the pace, set the standard for how the work gets done, and shows the passion and obsession with getting things done better and faster. This approach quickly identifies poor performers in the organizations, because they will most likely, under the pressure of this leadership, would try to get out of the organization. And this style can become overbearing and may deteriorate the morale in the organization if people feel that whatever they do does not meet the excellence that is demanded by the leader. They may also get exhausted and lose enthusiasm if the pressure is on for a long time, and it may be appropriate in situations where when you need to get some quick results, quick wins, and when you have a very competent and self-motivated team working with you. The last leadership style that we are going to look at is the coaching style. This is when the leader says, try this. The leader is delegating tasks and responsibilities to people and given them challenging assignments. But in this setup, people are able to find their strengths, their weaknesses, and they are able to grow in this environment under the coaching and the guidance of the leader. It is very effective when you're trying to improve the performance of the organization. You need to engage or bring more energy to the organization, and frankly use the resources in the organization to its maximum. It is not a very effective style if people are resistant to change, if they are not interested or capable of learning new skills, and are not willing to try or be challenged on new tasks. As I mentioned earlier in Goldman's study, one of the things that he found out is that the best leaders are those who can adapt to their environment and change their leadership style depending on the environment they are dealing with, the organization they are dealing with, or the situation they are dealing with. And the other thing that Goldman discovered was that this ability of people to be able to be in sync with what is going on around them, which he calls emotional intelligence, is critical in them being able to understand the different environments, different situations, and be able to switch to the style that is most appropriate for that situation. The understanding of emotional intelligence on my personal level is probably one of the biggest learnings and the biggest factor that contributed to my professional and personal success. Emotional intelligence includes four distinct capabilities: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and social skills. Now let's take a closer look at the four capabilities that are embedded in emotional intelligence. The first two are focusing on yourself, and the last two are focusing on how you interact with others. So looking at the very first one is being self-aware of your emotions, understanding your own emotions, understanding your capabilities and assessing your capabilities, knowing what you're strong in and what are some of the weaknesses you have, so that you can adjust your expectations from yourself. Also, it's very important to have a positive feedback loop and positive reinforcement for yourself. We all have the inner voice that is continually provide us with feedback, and we have to make sure that we keep that inner voice in check, to make sure that it's always positive, and we don't beat ourselves unnecessarily. We acknowledge accomplishment, and if we do make a mistake, we learn from it and we move on. In addition to understanding our emotions and our capabilities, the second capability deals with managing, self-management of emotions. It deals with things such as self-control, being able to keep our impulses in check, the ability to be trustworthy so that people can trust you and they see your honesty and trustworthiness in their interactions with you, being conscientious about the responsibilities that you have, you take them seriously, the ability to adapt to new situations, and the ability to initiate new things when the opportunities lend themselves, and the ability to be achievement oriented, having a high standards of quality in everything that you do and everything that you perform. The third and fourth elements of emotional intelligence focuses on our interaction with others, and similarly the third one deals with the awareness, social awareness, being able to have empathy, that is being able to see things from other people's perspective so you can relate to them more effectively. Similarly, being aware of the organization you're in terms of the current priorities, current events in the organization, being able to network with people, and also understand the organizational politics, and also having a focus on service and providing customers with what they need and meeting their expectations. The fourth element of emotional intelligence focuses on your social skills and improving those social skills, such as the ability to have a visionary leadership and inspiring others, ability to influence and persuade others, ability to develop others by providing feedback and guidance, ability to communicate. That includes listening as well as communicating clearly, either in writing or orally, being a change catalyst so that you initiate new ideas and you lead and help people to move in new directions. The ability to manage conflicts. Conflicts are going to happen in any social settings, and how we deal with those make a huge difference. Being able to build bonds and cultivate relationship with people within the organization, with people outside the organization. In many cases, things get done because of those relationships. And if you have a wide network of people, you are able to accomplish a lot more than if you didn't. And of course, the ability to work in teams and collaborate. This is something that we have been working on in this course, and I hope you take it with you and continue to practice that in your professional career as well. You may ask, can we actually improve our emotional intelligence? The answer is yes, you can, but like any other habit that we have formed, it takes a great level of effort to change our habits. How do we go about doing it? The best way is to find out where we are now by getting feedback from others in terms of how we are doing in terms of our leadership approach. How do they want us to be, if any differently? So that would lay a path for us of where we are and where we need to be, and then develop a plan and execute it, just similar to many other things that we have done in project management. I do want to emphasize this concept of feedback and the fact that in this course you have had an opportunity to hear directly from your classmates in terms of your interaction with them, in terms of your leadership skills. This is something for you to really pay attention to, the attributes and the characteristics that others admire. You want to maintain them. The attributes that you have received negative feedback, those are the ones that you want to plan to work on and improve. I mentioned to you earlier that I learned about emotional intelligence somewhat later in my career, and this is one area I wish I had exposure to and I had learned it from the very beginning of my career. So if this is something that you're interested in exploring more, I found a nice video that is made by Yale University, and it's about an hour, and it's very comprehensive in terms of covering the subject. So I have the link here for you to watch that video on your own. So how does ethics factor into leadership? Let's start by defining what ethics are. These are a set of moral principles, standards of our conduct or the conduct of an organization. Culture, on the other hand, is a set of shared beliefs and assumptions and values that we learn from a society or from an organization. So ethical conflicts or dilemmas come about when our ethical values are in conflict with the organizational culture. And as a project manager, as a leader, one of our responsibilities is to create and maintain an ethical culture in the organization. In many organizations, there is a process in place to introduce and orient and socialize the new people who join the organization with the ethics and the culture in the organization. These can be through formal training, or it can be by informal learning from others. In Chevron, for example, we had formal training about the Foreign Corrupt Act, which basically states that you do not bribe foreign officials to gain business advantage. This was very fundamental and very much ingrained in the culture. The same way, when I was in Chevron, the culture of safety was baked into the organization. The reason for it is, of course, Chevron has many plants and operations that are hazardous if safety practices are not followed, and can result in casualties, mass casualties at times. So it was built into the organization. When I joined the government, there were a series of training that managers and executives had to go through to understand the importance of being a good steward of public funds, because in the government we are using taxpayers' money to achieve our projects. So it's very important to keep in mind that we are simply stewards of public funds, and we have to be conscious of that as we make decisions about spending and about projects, and essentially making sure that we are not wasteful in our activities. Now let's take a look at different types of ethical leadership. We actually start with unethical leadership. This is when the leader of the organization promotes unethical practices and the workers follow it. There's a case study about Sunbeam's CEO, who was referred to as Chainsaw Al, and the way he promoted questionable accounting practices, and eventually he was convicted. He had to pay a large sum of settlement money to SEC, and he was banned to become an officer of a publicly traded company. Similar thing, by the way, happened more recently in Wells Fargo. You may have heard it or seen it in the news. It was a major embarrassment because the leadership in Wells Fargo promoted essentially working with the numbers and showing false information in terms of boosting the value of the company. And of course, it caused a lot of embarrassment and the change of top leadership in the bank. Another type of leadership is hypocritical in terms of ethics. This is probably the worst kind, when a leader is articulating ethical standards, but in his or her own way or behaviors, they are not following ethical rules. There's an example of Jim Baker and his wife Tammy, who had a ministries and went about selling essentially timeshare to people, and through fraudulent representation, they sold a lot more membership that really was the hotels could support, and eventually Jim Baker got convicted and was prisoned for 8 years. Another leadership style in the area of ethics is ethically neutral, meaning that the leader does not demonstrate a strong support for ethical standards. Essentially, people in the organization are not sure the ethical standing of the leader. There's an example of this leadership style with the chairman of the board of the Citigroup, that in early 2000s, the Citigroup got involved with questionable accounting and practices that resulted in Enron corporation hiding a lot of their debts, and eventually the Enron company went bankrupt. But that was kind of a wake-up call for this leader, and after that he made promises that keeping highest ethical standard would be his top priority for the Citigroup. Of course, the best leadership style is ethical leadership, when the leader makes it very clear that the ethical standards are to be held, and they're critical to the organization. And research actually has shown that when you have a leader with those characteristics, typically the organization as a whole will behave very ethically. Now let's take a look at some of the common ethical dilemmas that leaders will face. Many of those relate to human resource situations, cases of discrimination, sexual assaults, favorable treatment of employees. And these are the issues that leaders need to make sure that people in the organization on the project feel safe and protected, and they feel appreciated if they report those issues, and make sure that people are treated across the board in a fair and equitable way and in an impartial way. Another area of ethical dilemma is related to conflict of interest. This is when the personal interest of the leader is in conflict with the organizational interest. And these situations can be as overt or blatant as receiving bribes or kickbacks or very expensive gifts from people who you're doing business with in the hope of getting preferential treatment. For example, if you're deciding on a contract who to award it to, that's a situation where potentially people want to influence your decision, and they may do that by providing you gifts and other things. And this is something that you have to be very careful about, and obviously it's unethical to do that. And the other impact of decisions of when people see that you actually pursuing your own interest versus and you're being impartial, they lose trust and confidence in your leadership, and that can have a significant impact in your ability and your standing as a leader in the organization. Another area of ethical issues come about when leaders lose confidence of their stakeholders because they did not share information openly, they were not transparent, they hide or they hid product safety information or reliability information. A good example of that recently was Volkswagen car company, that they distorted the emission information from their diesel engine cars and portrayed them as being much cleaner from the environmental perspective than they really were. And this actually costed the company millions, and I'm not sure exactly, maybe even billions of dollars in penalties. And it also impacted the confidence of the car owners in terms of going back to that company and buying their next car. Another area of conflict arises from the use of corporate resources. And these could be your title in the company, your business card, your email address that the company has issued you. All of these resources need to be used only for the company business, and you should not use those resources when you are expressing your opinion or personal opinion, or you're doing something on your personal business. So keeping the two separate is a good ethical standard that one should hold. So how do we make sound ethical decisions? We need to start by gathering facts, information, data, any ethical guidelines that exist, define what the ethical issue is, find out who's going to be impacted by this decision, and what are the consequences and obligations that come with the decision. And finally, you need to consider your own character and integrity in making those decisions. One of my bosses early in my career shared with me a rule that I've held since, and I've made it my own rule throughout my career, and that is, when I'm making a decision, I look at the decision and ask myself, if my decision in this particular area was published on Washington Post and it was a headline on the first page, would I be okay with this decision or not? It helps me to quickly figure out uh, what is uh, what is it that I really want out of this decision and the outcome of it. It's good to keep the ethical and legality issues in mind when we are dealing with various situations. And this chart is a good chart to sort out some of uh, the, the situations where it's a clear cut versus the ones that are not so clear. The situations that are ethical and legal, or unethical and illegal, they're usually pretty easy to make the decisions. It becomes a little bit more difficult when there are situations where it is legal but unethical to do certain things, or when it's illegal but it's ethical uh, to do certain things. This is typically less frequent. The situations here in the lower right are less frequent than upper left. The last topic that we discuss in leadership is how to create high performing teams. But before we get into that, let's first define what the real teams are and differentiate that versus working groups. A team, based on Katzenbach and Smith, is a small number of people with complementary skills who are committed to a common set of goals, a common purpose, and a common approach for reaching those goals, and a, a, and a group of people who hold themselves accountable for achieving those goals. To contrast teams versus work groups in a work group, members interact to share information, to share their best practices or ideas, but they don't necessarily share a set of performance goals. They each have their own goals. There is no joint work product that is produced necessarily by work group, and there is not a mutual accountability in a work group. And working groups are viable in many situations. For example, when you form a study group, that's a good example of a work group, that you share information with each other, you share some of the key ideas, key nuggets that you have learned, so you help one another. But each of the members of a study group may have different performance goals in mind for their study. In their study of real teams, Katzenbach and Smith found that teams generally flourish when there is a clear set of goals, clear set of objectives for the team. That's why we have been emphasizing the clarity of measurable organizational value, MOVs, as a way to gel and bring the team together throughout the project. And sometimes when this very basic idea is overlooked, teams fail when there is no clear purpose for the team being together. If that's not articulated well, most likely the team would fail. And the other thing they found was that many organizations, or in fact most organizations, reward individual achievements versus the team achievement. And this is something that, if you recall, we had some discussions when we were talking about quality management, and the organizations that focus on more of team accountability and team reward tend to promote stronger and higher performing teams. Katzenbach and Smith, they had some uncommon or non-intuitive findings from their studies as well. One was that when leaders established strong performance goals or stretch goals for the teams, it actually forced the teams to become a real team and become a high-performing team. Another thing they observed was that the high-performance teams are not that common, and in fact, if you have the opportunity to become a member of high-performing team, you realize how amazing that feeling is, and you probably remember that experience for the rest of your career. And one of the observations is that you quickly realize how much more a high-performing team can accomplish, and it's by far more than the sum of the things that individual team members could have accomplished themselves. Now let's talk about multicultural projects and the fact that many of the international projects, you would expect that you have representation of different cultures. When I was on the Tengiz project in the Republic of Kazakhstan with Chevron, we had people from many cultures involved in that project. We had a large contingent of British and Australian folks working with Chevron. We had contractors from Turkey, from Hungary. So there were many different cultures, many different languages, and of course we had a continual interaction and involvement of Kazakhs in the project. So it's pretty much understood and pretty much expected on an international project. You would have that diversity. But the fact is that today in many of our domestic projects, we also have a multicultural representation on our team, and leading and managing a multicultural team has its own challenges. Let's look at some of those challenges that multicultural projects bring about. The challenges in an international project may involve in the fact that people are in different locations and very often in different time zones. So as we discuss in the communication section, you actually have to be thinking about asynchronous communication. In many cases, you have challenges with currency exchanges, that some products are bought or some services are rendered that require different currency. There are different regulations and laws that you need to become aware of. You have to become familiar with the political challenges of wherever the project is being carried out. And there may be different cultures towards work and the ethics of work and how much you work. There may be some constraints because of the religion and the religion practices. There are clearly some barriers in terms of language, and food can be if you have the opportunity to be together with others. There are different tastes in food. Frankly, I have found that food can be a uniting factor if you have the opportunity to share with the rest of the team a meal or sharing different kinds of food. That's actually one of the most effective ways to build a high-performing team and bring the team together. So it is important to understand and manage diversity so that we are effective in managing not only international projects, but even domestic projects. Diversity can be in many forms, and it can be in the differences of culture, nationality, ethnicity, religion, gender, or generational differences. There is a tool on the next page we are going to, or next slide, that we are going to take a look at, and it's a diversity wheel, and it has different dimensions of diversity, and it's a good tool to remind us that we may look the same as others, but there may be some underlying differences that we need to be aware of. And this diversity wheel helps us to identify those dimensions of diversity that influence the way people behave, the way people get motivated, and as well as how the customs and traditions may be different in a diverse team. And it also reminds us that we may be different in many areas, but we may also have a lot of things in common. So this is the diversity wheel, and as you can see, it has a number of inner circles referred to as dimensions. The first one is internal dimensions. These are the attributes related to the personality or the attributes of the individuals on the team, and it can be gender, age, sexual orientation, physical ability, ethnicity, or race. Then you have the external dimensions, could be geographical location, could be income, your recreational habit, your religion, your educational background, the work experience you have, your parental status, marital status, and the like. And then the outer circle is organizational dimensions. These are the attributes that are related to your status, your placement in the organization, such as work content, the division or department that you belong to, the seniority that you have, your work location. Are you representing the unions or the workers or the management? So this gives you a quick assessment of, do you have various diversity that is needed for your team? Do you have those on your team? For example, if you're dealing with an issue that that is between the management and the workers, you probably want to make sure that you have a good representation of both sides on the team. So with this, it concludes my lecture on chapter 10, and thank you for paying attention. As usual, we have a quiz for this chapter, chapter 10 quiz. You can access it, and it should take you about 15 minutes to complete that quiz to assess how well you know the materials that we discussed.